Welcome back, everybody. I'd like to start off our afternoon programming here with Rick Torres. He's going to give a keynote, a few remarks here, and then we're going to sit down and dive into the story behind the data that he's going to share. Rick retired in March of 2025 after 17 years as president and CEO of the National Student Clearinghouse, where he led one of the most significant transformations in education data infrastructure in the United States. Since then, Rick has focused his work at the intersection of data, AI deployment, and the future of skills, credentials, and learning ecosystems. He has long been engaged in nonprofit governance and system-level change. He currently serves on the boards of Intermediary Ed and Achieving the Dream, has spent more than 20 years on the Bridgepoint Community College Foundation Board, and previously served on the boards of the American Association of Community Colleges and the National College Attainment Network. He's also a founding member of the Groningen Declaration Network and currently is its chairs its advisory council. He holds an MBA in international finance from Georgetown University and an undergraduate degree in marketing and management from Manhattan College. Let's please put our hands together for a warm welcome for Mr. Rick Torres.
Thank you, Rod. Hey, everybody. First, I'd like to thank Kiran for the lovely invitation to speak with you today. And so I thought this is kind of an interesting interlude between all the AI very focused work that we've been hearing about today and looking at now enrollment trends and how they relate to what's happening in the workforce and the evolution to skills. So that is what I'm going to be focused on today. So I think this is the only screen that's working from what I can see, so not behind me. So the first thing, I used to work at the Clearinghouse. It has the most up-to-date information around enrollment trends. So let's talk about what's happening at a very high level. I could probably spend a half hour on each one of these sections, but I'm not going to do that. It's just about giving you a sense of what's happening out there. So the fall term enrollment numbers were 19.4 million learners nationwide. 16.2 of those were in undergraduate programs. It's actually a pretty robust number. As a matter of fact, it's the third consecutive year of growth, right, since the pandemic. Really interesting. And then the next point is that the community colleges have actually been leading the charge on the enrollment growth, right? And this is something that when you look at the state flagship institutions and the big private institutions in the United States, the four-year schools, their enrollments are basically flat. So most of this growth has come out of the community college sector. This kind of gives you a sense of where it was. It was 18.6 million a few years ago. And here we are at 19.4, almost all of that growth coming out of the sector. This is an interesting chart. What this describes is, on the left, different categories of CIP programs. Okay, so the first one, for example, is health professionals and related clinical sciences. And the orange bar is community college growth in the last 2 years in absolute numbers. The blue bar represents the primarily associate degree granting, but also baccalaureate awarding schools. So if you have a community college that also awards baccalaureates, it's in that category. So if you look at the health profession and related clinical sciences, what this is telling you is that since 2023, there are over 120,000 additional students enrolled in those programs over the last 2 years than where they were in 2023. Right, so that's the way you read this chart. And for the primarily associate degree granting baccalaureate programs, that number is about 38,000, as you can see there. So you can see the different programs: liberal arts and sciences, business management, mechanic and repair technologies, construction trades, etc. So again, this data comes from the National Student Clearinghouse's fall 2025 report. So what are the signals that we're seeing? This was supposed to kind of tumble in one at a time, but you're getting it all at once. So the first thing, you heard a little bit about this morning. Students are beginning to select heavily, looking for stackable credentials and short-term, short-form credentials. That's where you're seeing a lot of that growth. Second, the enrollment growth is concentrated in workforce-aligned programs. All right, so if you take a look at the major categories that students are electing to take, they are all aligned with workforce programs. And then the last point is that transfer and reskilling pathways are becoming increasingly important. So the need to reskill, upskill are all drivers. So you heard a lot this morning about meeting students where they are, and where they are is evolving. And one of the things that you have to do as a vocational school or as a community college, right, is to understand what's happening in the area, in your region, to be able to meet learners where they are so that you can help them move forward. Oh, there's the loop. Okay, so this is an important slide here. What I tried to do here at a high level was I pulled data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And the BLS growth rates for certain categories of jobs that require particular credentials are on the x-axis. On the y-axis, you have the enrollment compound annual growth rate within those disciplines. So the way you want to think about this is if you look at 51 all the way here at the end, the compound annual growth rate for 51, which is health professionals, has been over 10% a year. The BLS projected growth rate is up around 13%. So nationally, what that is telling you is that there's an alignment between the fact that students are choosing to go and get trained in those fields and the estimated growth of those fields from a labor standpoint. On the other hand, if you look at construction trades, BLS is projecting job growth at only 4%, which is really interesting when you start breaking down what they mean by job growth in the construction trades. But yet, there's been a compound annual growth rate of over 18% in that particular discipline. So one of the things that you have to examine, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, is this the first credential, or is this a stackable credential within the construction trades that are being offered here? I would suggest that as you look at workforce demands in your region, this is actually an interesting way to look at it, right? What is the actual demand for jobs in your region versus a national look? And then what is the pipeline of students that you're currently serving? Let me see, okay. So, Credential Engine is an entity, it's a nonprofit entity that just published a summation of the number of credentials that are available across the United States. That number right now is 1.85 million credentials. 1.85 million. So that means, picture yourself as a learner trying to figure out what badges, what micro-credentials, what degrees I should be taking. And you're looking at that number, which is, by the way, almost 1 million higher than it was 3.5 years ago, and saying, what is happening? Okay, where do I go? What do I do? That fragmentation creates a lot of confusion. Which one of these credentials is worthwhile, which is not? Burning Glass, interestingly, and the Center for Education Policy and Research just came out with some studies that it said if you base the value of a credential on the first wage that you get, when you complete the credential, only 12% of that 1.85 million are credentials of value. If you add in, did it help me get a promotion? Did it help me maybe change careers? Did it help me achieve some longer-term credential growth, which requires time? Burning Glass said out of that 1.85 million, one-third have quality value from an economic lift standpoint. So flip that around, 2/3, there's a lot of questions about the value of a lot of these credentials that are being offered out there. And you heard this morning a conversation about the students being that C word, a consumer, okay? The fact is they have a lot of choices. So what's the implication, right, to schools and institutions? The implication is that you've got to emphasize transparency and comparability. This is what we offer compared to what that is, and transparently show how what you're offering leads to a job. So if you're going to employ an artificial intelligence engine that is going to infer a pathway to a particular role, make sure that you're really focused on credentials and micro-credentials that matter, right? But also being able to show them transparently, here are the paths that you can take. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. So part of the work that I'm doing since I retired at the Clearinghouse has been trying to understand how enterprises, large companies, are deploying artificial intelligence, right? And what are the lessons that they are learning and how they can apply to the education sector. Well, the first thing I'm going to tell you is that for larger enterprises and across the board, they are moving from experimentation to adoption. They've learned the lessons of communication, of leadership, of change management, and also, very importantly, having the right data in order to begin to look at AI adoption. So this is underway. In higher education, we already see that there's some AI being used for advising, for some enrollment management, and analytics. Heck, there was a great case study, I believe, out of Georgia, where a chatbot was used to reinstate, to communicate with students. And when they did that, the melt between semesters was reversed. They did not lose students between semesters, and that ended up creating a net positive enrollment for between fall and spring semesters. But all they did was implement a chatbot to communicate with students proactively because they didn't have enough staff to do it. It's amazing how a little change can go a long way to support your student services. And then finally, the operational use cases are scaling much faster than the instructional pilots. And we heard this morning a little bit of a reference about faculty resistance, pedagogy, and how do I implement artificial intelligence into my training and learning. The problem is that needs to actually happen. Why? Because if you look at what's happening here, this is from Stanford University, and they talked about what's going to shift over time as you begin to deploy agents and they become part of the ecosystems in companies and in institutions. Well, if you look at on the left, the things we pay most money for today, analyzing information, for example, is something that's going to be table stakes for any artificial intelligence, right? That gathering of knowledge, that is not going to be the thing that's going to be paid a lot of money. However, human agency is going to become more important over time. This study, the SALT study, lists about 30 different types of work and the level of human agency within that work. And you can begin to understand that there is a relationship between the things that AI can probably take over and the human agency required to deliver the rest. And those are going to become of higher value over time, including the durable skills that are required to deliver those: critical thinking, communications, etc. So if you think about what's happening in the workforce, the employers are already now expecting AI literacy as a baseline. So what does that mean? Your accounting degree or your associate's degree in accounting for an entry-level bookkeeping position, have you incorporated any type of AI training or literacy into those programs? Right? Because one of the best lines I've ever heard is people are not going to lose their jobs because of AI. It's that people who refuse to work with AI are going to lose their jobs to people who actually know how to use it to do their job, right? And that's a very big difference. All right, and I think augmenting your work is something that people shouldn't be afraid of. Secondly, human skills and AI fluency are going to outperform the technical skills alone. So if you are treating AI as just a technical thing, it's not that, right? It's a combination of the human component and the technical component that are going to yield the highest potential for learners and for your workers. The credentials that you offer, and we talked about this earlier, have to signal job-relevant competencies. So I'm going to pause here a little bit because I know we're all talking about pathway engines and how do we let students understand what the pathways need to be. Well, that's changing very quickly. And artificial intelligence platforms that you may choose to elect to use to help inform those trajectories need to be able to capture job competencies as they're evolving. And I can tell you that there are plenty of entities out there that are publishing, and they scrape for all these new roles that are out there and the skills that are required for those jobs. And those jobs are evolving. Very traditional jobs that we have students in our pipeline right now studying, those jobs themselves are being redefined, right, as we speak. So what are some of the implications for community colleges and vocational school leaders? You actually need to have some real-time analytics about what's happening in your area, new businesses that are opening, what are the demands of your business community as it relates to the students that you are looking to attract and those that you're actually training. And that requires real-time analytics. Second, the credential design, right? This is work for your faculty. How do you design a curriculum that aligns tightly with the market demand that's in your area, right? And the first thing you need to say is, well, how do I figure out what the market demand is in my area? And there are data sources for that, right, to be able to pull that in. And this presentation, by the way, if you want to get a copy of it, in the back of it, I have a bunch of sources that show examples of schools that are doing each of these components really, really well, right, if you want to reference what they're doing. Finally, AI governance and infrastructure are leadership priorities. The leadership of your school or your company need to make sure that the governance structure of how you're going to use AI is in place. What do I mean by that? Well, if everybody's doing it and without any type of orchestration, then really nobody's doing it, right? So at the end of the day, there needs to be some orchestration of how things happen within a company or within an institution to bring in artificial intelligence. And that is one of the biggest lessons from corporations that have basically tried to figure out ways to do this, bottom up, top down. They find that getting that governance and infrastructure leadership, right, from the top is really important. So what I want to leave you with is this. If you're thinking about, my God, AI is evolving so quickly, like when is the right time to jump in? There's this thing called the 10-year relevance test. So where are you going to be in 10 years? All right, and it's a really interesting question. First of all, work right now is being redesigned and not just automated. So what do I mean by that? Just bringing in an agent to automate a task is insufficient, because what you want to be able to do is to improve that entire process. And the other thing is that most people have a real hard time understanding that you're not just taking a singular process, it's a workflow. And workflows tend to go between departments, right? And the decision-making that happens to be with different decision makers. So if you think about a typical org chart, an org chart is really a decision-making chart. Like, if you think about, well, this person can't make that decision, that one does. If they can't, then this one does. And a process to admit a student and get them landed with financial aid has several different departments that are evaluating that whole process all along the way. And if you wanted to automate all of that, the question is, okay, are you truly automating? Are you trying to really do the workflow differently using agents? That's the hard work. That is the hard work, but the companies that have been most successful at deploying artificial intelligence and the ones that are starting to show ROIs are the ones that have taken the time to do that, and that's very important. Second, it's funny. Well, I was doing a presentation in Oslo last November, and it must have been 150 people there. And I asked us, we did a little polling. How many of you are either using AI in the categories where, in the last week, and the categories were mostly personal, mostly work, equally work and personal. I haven't used it in the last week, and none at all. One person said none at all, never used it. About 80% were, at least within the last week, they've been using it. So the fact of the matter is, it's here. And that's why the governance piece is really important, because this is not new. People are using it, your students are using it, your faculty is using it. Heck, I haven't got my wife to finally step into it. We were going on a trip, and she's like, all right, show me the power of this thing. This was last fall. Planned a 2-week vacation. She told him how big the luggage was, and basically it modified what she should bring with the weather. And then it was crazy, right? And she said, I only have this much luggage. She told it what she wanted to bring. And by the time we packed, she knew it was very accurate. It was crazy how good it was. And it did it we were on a cruise, so it was like day by day, based on the weather forecast of what she needed. But that kind of gives you a sense of how easy it is all of a sudden to start using it and seeing a benefit. I believe, and I firmly believe this, that institutions that wait are going to lose relevance. And, when I joined the Clearinghouse in 2008, I remember hiring an attorney for the first time at the school. And in the process of interviewing, I had one gentleman tell me, well, you know how things get done in education, don't you? Because I was new to education at the time. I have a background in fast-moving consumer goods, PepsiCo, Capital One, et cetera. And he said, well, how things get done in education is you step into a vat of molasses, and then you begin to start moving. And then eventually, you'll make it to the other side. Well, this is not one of those times. I think there is a sense of urgency, right, for many schools to step in. And I don't think Mr. Dinsky was off by much this morning when he described the level of urgency that schools need to be thinking about in terms of addressing what are the opportunities to serve learners better and prepare them for a future that is happening right now in order to stay relevant. So I'm going to end my piece here, but I just wanted to give you a sense of what was happening, out there and some of the key lessons learned for AI adoption. I think Rod's going to come out now and have a chat.
Nice round of applause for Rick. Thank you, sir.